It was late after I walked my friend to his place after a night out drinking. It was raining, so I decided to kill some time in a convenience store and read some comic books. I was the only customer. When I looked out the window, I saw a woman holding a white umbrella and wearing a white dress walking by. I wondered what she was doing out so late, even though I was out myself. I didn't think anything of it and went back to reading. When I finished reading one whole book, I put it away and glanced out. It was still raining, and then I saw the same woman walking past again. She was on the sidewalk and there was a parking lot in between the convenience store and where she was walking, but I was sure it was the same person because of her distinct all-white attire. I thought it was a bit weird, but she probably had some errands to run and happened to be walking back home just as I finished reading. After I finished a second comic book, I picked up a magazine and flipped through it. My neck and shoulders were a bit sore from standing in one spot with my head down, so I rotated my shoulders and kneaded my neck to release some tension. I looked out the window, and there she was, the woman in the white dress with a white umbrella. She was walking down the street again. This time I felt a bit uneasy and I turned my head down quickly. I suddenly felt like it would be bad if she caught me looking at her. I finished reading another 2 books and chatted with the clerk on shift, bought some food, and decided to head home. The rain had finally begun to get lighter, and I figured it was my only chance to get home without getting drenched. I said goodnight to the clerk and stepped outside. I walked across the parking lot and got onto the sidewalk when my heart almost stopped. About 20 meters or 65 feet in front of me was the woman in white. Why was she still out wandering around this area? She seemed to be walking around aimlessly. Mind you, this area was in the countryside, so it was dark out on the streets, which made her white silhouette even creepier. She seemed to be walking in the direction that I needed to go to, and I really didn't want to get close, so I began to walk extra slow in hopes of increasing the distance between us. But no matter how slow I walked, I kept catching up to her. How slow could she be? I wondered. When the distance had gotten to about 3 meters or 10 feet, I knew I didn't want to get any closer or walk past her, so I decided to turn the next corner and take a different way home. Before I could though, the woman turned at that corner, so I let out a sigh of relief and continued straight. Even though she had no idea what was going through my head this entire time, I felt bad and a bit stupid for being so creeped out by her. Along with the fact that she turned the corner, which saved me from having to take the long way home, I gave her a quick bow as she continued to walk away from me. Just as I did so, I heard her say something, but she was still walking and didn't seem to even realize I was behind her, so she was probably just talking to herself. I came across the next intersection and looked both ways for cars. When I looked to the right, I saw the familiar neighborhood and someone holding a white umbrella. I felt a cold chill trickle down my spine and suddenly had a bad feeling. Just until now, no matter how slow I walked, I kept catching up to that woman. But now I was walking much faster so that I could hurry up and get home, and the woman who was one street over was walking parallel to me and at the same pace. Was this all just a coincidence? Or maybe she was mentally unwell and was playing a kind of game by following me and trying to match my strides. Every time I came to an intersection, she was always crossing it at the exact same time. I tried slowing down and speeding up in places when I knew she couldn't see me, but it didn't work. The woman with the white dress and white umbrella was always there. I was officially freaked out, so at one point I didn't bother checking if she was there and ran as fast as I could to the next big intersection. I was trying to calm myself down, trying to convince myself that I was running to avoid getting drenched by the rain, and not because I was trying to escape from the strange woman. When I got to the stoplights, I was relieved to finally see some cars driving past. I slowly glanced to the right, trying not to be obvious. Thank God, she wasn't there anymore. I almost started laughing at myself for being so stupid and freaked out by nothing. Where I was standing was the only place to cross the road to the other side, so the woman must have lived in the area I just ran past. But just to be on the safe side, once I crossed over and came to the next intersection, I plucked up my courage and looked over to the right. She wasn't there. I kept checking until I was finally at the last bend before getting home. Each time I failed to see her, the more relaxed I became and slowly regained my composure. I turned right onto my street and after a few steps saw a white figure come out from a back street further down. I stopped walking and froze, wondering if she could be the same woman, and wondering how the hell she got to the street she was coming out from. Before I knew it, she had turned onto the same street I was on and began walking in my direction. I felt all my skin cells shrink as I got goosebumps all down my face, arms, and back. I swiftly turned around and began running back the way I'd come from. I tried to run as quietly as I could so that she couldn't hear which direction I was going, but when I turned a random corner, I saw her appear again from the other end. She walked onto my street again, and just when she reached the halfway point, she twisted around in a very awkward and unnatural way to face me, and began walking towards me. It was around 3 a.m. by this point. The houses were dark and it was silent except for the sound of rain that was still coming down. There were only a few lampposts dotting the road, but I could see her bright white umbrella and dress as clear as day. I screamed, threw down the food that I'd bought at the convenience store, and ran away again. I took my phone out and fumbled to dial my friend, trying hard not to drop it or fall on my face. He was asleep but answered the phone, and I told him that I was heading to his house right now and to please let me in. I had walked him home just a few hours ago, so he was confused as to why I wasn't home yet, but he agreed and I continued to run like hell back to his house. I passed the big intersection and then the convenience store. I had one more turn until I reached his place, but she was there. She was standing underneath one of the lights as if she'd been waiting for me for a while. My brain was scrambled by this point. There was no way in hell she could be there ahead of me. She would have had to run faster than me, but she wasn't out of breath at all. And how would she have known where I was going? Instead of turning on to where my friend lived, I continued straight, but she kept reappearing at every intersection. I didn't know what else I could do. I obviously wasn't going to outrun her or be able to get away. That's when I heard my phone ringing. I fished it out of my pocket and looked at the screen. It showed that I had just missed a call and 3 others before that, and it was past 4 a.m. I was surprised. It felt like it had only been about 10 minutes, but an hour had already gone by since I left the convenience store. I felt like I was dreaming and started to get really confused because I was running around the same area for an hour and all the houses and streets began to look the same. My neighborhood began to look like a place I'd never been before. I called my friend again. He must have been waiting up for me and asked in a sleepy voice where I was and whether I was coming or not. I told him that I wanted to, but that I couldn't because the woman in white was always ahead of me and waiting for me at every corner. My friend replied that he didn't know what I was going on about, but if I couldn't get to his house because the woman was always a few steps ahead of me, he suggested that I let her chase me until I got to his place. What now? I was still running around like a headless chicken in full-fledged panic. Pretty sure adrenaline was coursing through my veins because I don't know how I was managing to run at that speed for so long. Anyway, the only thing I could do was tell my friend that I couldn't understand anything he was saying. My friend remained calm and patient, and he explained to me slowly. Just do what I say. Turn the corner in the opposite direction to my house. If you do that, the woman's going to be waiting somewhere down the street ahead of you, right? That means she's furthest from me. When you see her, don't turn around. Keep her in your sights and run backwards towards my place. Then she'll probably chase you instead of appearing in front of you. Try it. I couldn't think about the logistics and I just wanted to get out of this terrifying situation, so I told him okay. I did as I was told and turned a corner going the opposite way, and sure enough, I saw the woman appear at the intersection ahead of me. As much as I wanted to avoid looking at her, I gritted my teeth and began running backwards towards my friend's house. Sure enough, the woman started moving towards me. But when she got to the intersection I had come through initially, she would retreat. And every time I tried to turn a corner or run into a side street, she would reappear again somewhere ahead of me. I was finally making headway and was almost at my friend's house. When it came into view, I heard a sudden booming sound right from behind me. It sounded like a mixture of a horn and a woman's scream. It wasn't any kind of machine, nor was it human, and I instinctively knew that it was the woman who was trying to say something. Or maybe a better term would be the thing. I put my last remaining strength into my legs, screamed at my friend to come outside, and ran towards it like my life depended on it. He told me he'll come out, and when he saw me approaching, he laughed and said,
"Oh, jeez, you're soaking wet. Where's your umbrella, man?"
I could barely breathe, let alone talk, but I wheezed out what I went through for the past hour and a half. I pointed towards the intersection down the road. The thing in the white dress and white umbrella was standing there. My friend freaked out. He definitely didn't believe me until he saw it with his own two eyes. We ran into his house and locked the door and all the windows. We could hear that strange noise echoing outside, and my friend's cat began walking back and forth restlessly. It didn't take that long until the sun came up. With the first light of dawn, the noise that the thing was making had faded away, and the heavy, ominous feeling was completely lifted. The air felt much lighter, and I felt like I was back in the real world again. Shortly after, my friend and I wasted no time going to a shrine in the prefecture that was famous for exorcisms. The priest did what he had to do for us. As we were leaving, he said,
"You should forget everything that happened. There are too many things in this world that cannot be explained, and I don't even know what it is that you guys encountered."
This experience shook me to the core and has made me think that we truly are not alone on Earth, that there are so many dark entities surrounding us. Most are just lucky that they haven't encountered any of them. I have goosebumps just writing it down. Anyway, if anyone who reads this comes across this thing, just remember the advice my friend gave in order to escape. I work for a company that manages about 12 apartment buildings, and I'm basically the only one that overlooks them. The main branch of the company is engaged in various businesses, and profits are spent on auction properties for tax purposes. Because the company goes for cheap properties, many of them are extremely old and creepy. Anyway, if you've been doing this job for a long time, you'll come across strange things related to various rooms. The following is a story about one of these apartment complexes called K Apartment, which was built about 25 years ago. It's a one-room type apartment for people who live alone, and the company purchased it about 3 years ago. Apparently, it was auctioned off because the owner ran away overnight, and there were many deficiencies in the property documents, such as inconsistencies and unclear tenant contracts and rental income statuses from its tenants. Or maybe these things were normal with auctioned buildings. I don't really know. Upon some research, to our pleasant surprise, we found out that all the rooms were occupied except for 3 of them. 2 of them had been vacant for about 6 months, but it seemed like room 401 had been empty for a very, very long time. It was strange because it was a corner room with good sunlight. When I went to go look at the empty rooms, the 2 more recently vacated rooms were fully renovated, but room 401 was untouched. Walking through it, I assumed the owner just didn't have the funds to fix it up and left it as is. It was a typical studio-type room. There was a unit bath and a small kitchen upon entering the apartment, and another door which led into a room. There was a window on the right wall and a small balcony at the furthest end. There was a small chest of drawers, a 3-tiered box, and 2 TVs. Inside the closet, there was a futon and a bunch of small items. Feeling a bit annoyed that we would have to pay a fee to get this place emptied out, I was rummaging through various items when I suddenly had a feeling that someone was watching me. I've definitely felt creeped out and uncomfortable when I had checked out other apartments where people have run away, leaving all their belongings behind, never to return. Those rooms still had the individual smell lingering in the air, and it was all so fresh, as if they might return at any moment. But what I was feeling now was different. It almost made me feel nauseous. I did my best to ignore it, but the longer I lingered, the stronger the feeling got, and I eventually figured out that it was coming from the direction of a full-length mirror hanging on the wall. It was attached to the wall, so I couldn't remove it. I immediately had a weird feeling about this room, but I had to take care of a few more things, so I got it done as quickly as possible while avoiding eye contact with that mirror. I got out of there as soon as I finished taking pictures and videos of the interior and rushed back to the company. Once I got back, I made arrangements for the apartment to get renovated. A few days later, I received a call from the remodeling company. They said,
Hey, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think there's something in that room.
I knew it, I thought to myself, and replied,
What do you mean? What happened? We're in room 401 right now. I think it'll be faster if you just come here.
When I got there, the two men from the renovation company were standing in front of the full-length mirror. They said,
Hi, thanks for coming. I think you should take a look behind this mirror.
Not knowing what to expect, I slowly poked my head around. It was covered in ofuda. Let me jump in here real quick and explain what an ofuda is. In Shinto and Buddhism in Japan, an ofuda is a talisman made out of various materials such as paper, wood, cloth, or metal. They're commonly found in shrines and temples, and you can often purchase them. Certain kinds of ofuda are intended for a specific purpose, such as protection against calamity or misfortune, safety within the home, or even to find love. They can be kept in wallets, for example, and carried around or placed on gates, doorways, kitchens, and ceilings. When we encounter ofuda in the stories shared on this channel, they're usually used to ward off evil spirits or to keep them trapped within something, such as a room or a box, for example. So, now that you know what it is, let's get back to the story. Half of the ofuda were black, as if they were covered in soot. I knew something was off about this room, but I wasn't expecting something like this. There were 2 builders there, but apparently there were 3 of them in the beginning. One of them suddenly got a bad headache after entering the apartment and had to go home. The main guy said,
We've obviously worked in countless different places, but this place might be one of the creepiest places we've ever been to. When I was taking the mirror off the wall just before, I saw a figure reflected in it, and it wasn't my colleague.
This was obviously an extreme situation, so I made a phone call to a monk that we had business dealings with. We had used his services a number of times to bless various buildings and rooms. When he arrived, he read out some Buddhist incantations to make sure that the workers and myself were all cleansed, and ended the day. Once renovations were over, the room was ready to be leased. We lowered the monthly rent, and within a month, a woman in her 50s signed the contract. I can't reveal too much detail, but she had previously been hospitalized in a psychiatric ward for a long time and was under government aid. She was accompanied by a caseworker and was soft-spoken and very lovely. A few days passed without incident, but then we received a phone call from a woman living in Unit 402. She told us that the new tenant in room 401 would start screaming nonsensical things and bang on the wall repeatedly. I called the other tenants of the building to see if they had seen strange behavior too, and they indeed had. Apparently, the lady would come out of her apartment at night and scream out into the hallway, saying things like something was coming out of the ceiling, that someone was watching and observing her, that she was being brainwashed, that people living in the apartment were whores and bringing in men all the time, and that this entire building was a whorehouse. Obviously, none of it made any sense, and because she would scream similar things out of her balcony, the police were called on several occasions to sort out the matter. When I finally went to go talk to her during the day, she seemed to be the same lovely woman I'd met when she signed the contract, although her eyes looked a lot more sharp as if she was suspicious of everyone and was studying them. She told me she couldn't sleep because something was watching her from the ceiling 24/7. As she told me, I naturally looked up and I couldn't believe what I saw. There was a hole with a diameter of about 30 centimeters or 12 inches. How the hell did that get there? I wondered. After discussing things with her, we decided it was best for her to move out because she didn't want to be there anymore. I called her caseworker and the lovely lady was sent back to the hospital and the contract was terminated. After she moved out, I called the same renovation company to fix the hole in the ceiling. A few days later, I received a call from them.
Hey, it's about room 401 again.
I cut him off.
Oh yeah, the room's clean, so all you have to do is fix that hole in the ceiling. Yeah, it's about that. We went to go look at it and looked into the hole. The entire space above it was covered in ofuda again.
I didn't know what to say for a while. All I said was,
Just fix that hole for now, thanks.
And quickly ended the call. The previous tenant was apparently hospitalized previously due to her manic depressions, so I convinced myself that that was the reason for her strange outbursts, that it had nothing to do with room 401. After 6 months of keeping the unit off the market, we put it back out, and again we immediately found a tenant. This time it was a man in his late 20s. He had a proper job and his parents were his guarantors. Looking at his picture, it seemed he was level-headed and had a stable and healthy life, so we went forward with the papers. I met him once after he moved in, and I remember he was very polite. Things got weird 3 months later. We got a call from his parents saying they couldn't get in contact with their son and asked if they could be let into his apartment. Then I noticed that his rent for the month had not been paid yet. The next day, his parents drove up and they informed me that he hadn't shown up for work for a while either. I had a very bad feeling. It's not that uncommon for individuals to up and leave without a trace, but there are worse things that could happen. We quickly headed to the apartment and once there, rang the doorbell. No one answered. The door was locked, so I used the spare key and opened it, but it was also chain locked. As soon as the door opened a crack, our nostrils were assaulted with the worst smell ever, and it literally made me gag. It was pitch dark inside and we could see a mountain of trash everywhere. I called out his name and informed him that I was from the real estate, that his parents were also there. They made their presence known, but there was still no response. But now that the door was open, we could hear the TV. I suddenly remembered I had a chain cutter in my car and ran to fetch it. Because this was a semi-official matter, I told the parents that I will be going in first. I cut the chain, called out once again that I was coming in, and stepped inside. I immediately stepped on some trash. The apartment was dark other than the faint light coming from the TV on low volume.
Hello? You home?
I kept calling out. I walked past the kitchen and was about to step into the main room, but I peeked into it first. The man was there. He was sitting on his futon, hugging his legs. I don't know what I was expecting to see, but it freaked me out and I screamed. The parents heard me and came in. They rushed past me and when they saw their son, began shaking him and asking if he was okay. He didn't utter a sound. His hair and beard had grown long and he just sat there staring off into space. I tried to turn on the light, but it didn't work. I thought that was weird because the TV was on, so I looked up at the ceiling. The entire area was covered in black bin bags. Come to think of it, the room was ridiculously dark even though it was daytime. And that's when I saw that all the windows had also been covered with black bin bags. This was insane. He'd obviously gone crazy. It was the only explanation. But first things first, we called the ambulance and ripped off the bin bags from the windows and ceiling. The light had been taken off, and there it was. Another hole right next to it. When the ambulance arrived, the parents, who were crying, accompanied the man to the hospital. A few days later, the mother came to our office and told us that her son would be moving back home with them to recover, so she was there to break the lease. I really wanted to ask what happened to him, but I couldn't bring myself to. The room has been empty for 2 years now since he moved out because we haven't put it out on the market. Apparently, there's a rumor amongst those living in the complex that it's haunted and anyone living in it will become possessed. I don't know how true it is, but what I saw happen makes me wonder if that could potentially be the case. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that when I was taking photos and videos of the room the first day I went to check the unit, there was a section in the video that I don't remember taking at all, and it was of the ceiling. One night, my wife and I were lying in bed getting ready to go to sleep when she started giggling while looking at her phone.
What is it? Did something good happen?
I asked, and she said,
Yeah, something like that. My best friend from middle school just contacted me out of the blue. I haven't heard from her for so long.
I was happy for her and asked her who her friend was. My wife replied,
Her name's Kumi. We were in the same class all through middle school. She was a really shy girl and I was her only friend, so she was always with me. She was petite and quiet and I naturally wanted to protect her. Apparently she's back in her hometown and is doing well.
My wife had a smile on her face and looked up into the air as she told me, as if she was replaying some of the fond memories they'd had together all those years ago. We turned the light off and my wife continued to talk about Kumi in the dark, how they begged the teacher to put the two of them in the same group for their school trip, how Kumi asked for advice about her future career, etc. Apparently, Kumi had a lot of respect for my wife and kind of looked up to her. I was intrigued as I listened to her and thought how nice it was that even my soft-spoken wife had a time in her life that someone relied on her like that. A few days later, I got a call from my wife's younger brother. He asked if I was home so he could return the fishing rod he'd borrowed a while ago. When he got there, we chatted for a while and I told him about how my wife talked happily about her old friend Kumi the night before. He knew exactly who I was talking about.
Oh yeah, Kumi. I remember her well. She was the president of the student council and my sister was always tagging along like goldfish poop that can't be shaken off. I think Kumi felt a bit annoyed at times, but she was kind, so she was never rude to my sister.
Did I hear that right? I thought maybe he was mistaking the girl for another Kumi, but no. He continued to say that my wife had no friends because she was so shy and the only person she talked about at home was Kumi, and that's why he remembered her so well.
But,
he said,
she died just before graduating middle school. She failed her high school entrance exam and took her own life.
Once again, I was utterly confused. Kumi's dead? But my wife said she received a message from her last night. There had to be two different Kumis. Or my wife was lying about the whole thing. Nothing else makes sense. Anyway, ever since that day, I'm a bit scared of my wife and I don't intend on asking her about Kumi. There was a girl in the hospital who had been told she only had 3 months left to live. When her 2 friends came to visit her, wanting a picture of the 3 friends while her daughter had enough strength to sit and smile, the mother took a picture of them. The 2 girls went on either side of her, gave the best smile they could considering the circumstances, and posed for the camera. It was only a week after this that the girl's condition suddenly worsened, and she did indeed pass away within 3 months. A few days after the funeral, the mother remembered one of the last photos she'd taken of her daughter. She took the film to get it developed, and when she received the photos and flipped through them, realized that the one of her and her friends was missing. She asked the man in charge why that was, and he replied rather suspiciously,
Oh yeah, that one, it was overexposed, so I didn't bother developing it.
The mother didn't believe him. She told him it was one of the last photos she had of her daughter before she passed away and absolutely needed it. Hearing this, the man had no choice but to give it to her. He warned her to not be shocked when she sees it, went to the back room and came back out with that stuff. The picture showed the 3 girls. The 2 friends looked exactly as they should, but her daughter, she was sitting there in a mummified state. The mother was horrified. She told the man she was going to keep it and take it to the shrine to dispose of it the rightful way. Before she did so, however, she contacted a psychic and showed him the picture, asked if it was a sign of something, asked if it was good or evil. The man didn't talk for a good couple of minutes. In fact, he didn't seem to want to say anything. The mother pressed him, begged him to tell her what this signified, and he finally said in a hushed voice,
I'm sorry, but your daughter has gone to hell.